I don't have to use a screen recorder anymore. What do you think about that? I'm real happy about it if you can hear me. That means I don't even have to fucking edit the shit. I could put it up there and it'll be up there. They'll never put me on sideways. They won't put me on sideways. I'm having pairs. With everything else that isn't working, or it seems to me not fucking moving anywhere. One thing is, I sat there a minute ago when Daniel Jackson was in Ori, taking a gate through to the Pegasus galaxy with some ancient weapon from Merlin, when he had Merlin on him. But I kept my eyes closed and I just listened to the end finale of that probably whole season, and I meditated. And I did it for a good while. A good while. I sat there and I listened to the from some stupid app I downloaded. But I turned the volume down, I closed my eyes, and I sat up and I breathed. And I breathed. And then when I saw I had 212 people, I realized I was like, these are souls. These are souls. I don't mean like I've captured the souls, but the souls are together. I'm like, God damn. That's the only thing I've ever wanted. And it's true. I love making fucking videos. And we're on standby for a job. So it's like there's not too much I could do that wouldn't be just getting in my own way. If I'm supposed to wait, and I don't like to wait. Obviously, I don't do it good. It's not my way, but I have. And I feel so much better for it. And I sat there and when I meditated, I have thought. I'm like, we're not supposed to be in a universe in a position of lack. That if I sit here and I breathe and I focus on the breath, the universe will respond and provide for me a way to go that I may not know. And I opened to it and I listened. I didn't freak out. I didn't go and veg out either. The first 15 times I got hungry for something. There's nothing to eat anyway. We're down to cans of corn, pears, and applesauce. Applesauce. Who's your boss? Applesauce. Spirit. So I'm having a difficult time and a very simple but difficult area to navigate. I had to do something I never thought I would do. I took the goddamn battery out of the Viagra clock. Do you know why? Because it makes a fucking annoying click, 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 click. I was about to lose my fucking mind. I said, I can't do that. And it really was. It was too much. My ring broke. That turns into like opened up into all kinds of other rings. You see that though? I can still wear this piece. I can still wear this piece. They just can't hook together anymore. I gave the little girl Nalea, I gave her one of the smaller rings because I thought she could use it and she would like it on New Year's Eve the other night. She liked it. We were playing with these, mix them together with this Canadian coin. All the times I don't know shit, but this time, look, I've got it. You know what I want to do too? Hey, you know what? Let's go to the next fucking chapter. Let's go to the next fucking chapter in the book. Case 2, Male Monarch, Dragonfly, Green Star. Pow pow. Are you ready? I'm ready. I was born on Halloween night during a blizzard. Despite the weather, a handful of close relatives made it to the hospital in their costumes to see me come into this world. It was a traumatic birth, from what I've been told. I was choking on feces and strangled by the umbilical cord. God damn. The birth took a longer than average time. The doctor ultimately had to pull me out with the forceps. Afterward, I was not allowed to leave and go home with my mother, but instead I stayed in an incubator for 5 days before I could go home. Using deprogramming techniques and the green spiral staircase exercise has brought me back some memory of the time in the hospital. I observed myself outside of my body. As the circumcision process, a circumcision to circumcise or to not circumcise. Well, he was circumcised. To circumcise or not circumcise, the process happened. Also, to my shock, I saw myself being carried away to a ballroom full of people in black and red robes. Oh, fuck. Uh oh. In the middle was some sexual activity that I know I must have been some sort of ritual, as it was the center of attention. I'm not certain what the intent was for letting me be present. Perhaps they wanted to imprint me with an astral entity, or I was supposed to be sacrificed. I know my father wanted an abortion, but my mother escaped each time he tried to make an appointment. On the last on at least one time, he tried to physically cause a miscarriage with punches. The ritual was not inside the hospital itself, rather I believe now that it was in a church that was adjacent to the hospital known as Brittany Hill. It possibly they somehow connect through restricted access hallways, but I cannot say for certain. This church is popular for being rented for weddings and is actually where my parents were married. My parents divorced promptly after my birth, and my mother had full custody of me since my father did not appear in court. I have very little memory of my life before the age of 5, but I do remember was yelling and violence at the home when my father would visit. I recalled coming home from school one day and all of our furniture was gone. Another time we came home and the dog was dead. I was not allowed to see the scene, but I was told that she got her head caught in a small hole in the lace of my mother's bed skirt and must have panicked, but ultimately strangled herself. Somehow, in the process, the blood was splattered everywhere. But I didn't believe that story at all. I think it was more likely a message of retaliation that she was purposefully killed. My grandparents on my father's side showered me with gifts, and promptly stopped around the age of 5, and then we had no relationship at all. Shortly after that, my grandmother died of a rapid onset cancer. This is very bizarre to me now when compared to my grandmother on my mother's side, who also died of cancer. I recalled her death being very slow and agonizing process, whereas with my father's mother, she was just suddenly gone one day. When I have inquired about this as an adult, I have been fed lies and completely disregarded before the subject was dropped. Another oddity is that I was told my grandmother had adopted her own brother after the death of their parents, so that my father's brother was, in fact, truly his uncle. He then became a doctor in Maryland. I was told, but but have since discovered him to be part of the NSA. My father is an automotive mechanic who had had a drug and alcohol problem since he was young. He described to me the harshness of his father's beatings and the sexual molestation, which I think contributed to his substance abuse. My grandmother was a descendant from the House of Tawley that can be traced to the House of Windsor. After her early death, my grandmother wasted no time in getting remarried to her sister, which was odd to me, even though I I know now that this woman he married had received a lot of money from the divorce of her first marriage into the family Westmoreland, who owned a farm in North Carolina. Coincidentally, there's an airport named Westmoreland Airport not far from where my grandfather worked at the Suffolk County Air Force Base near Montauk, New York. I have a suspicion that my grandmother may have known too much about my grandfather's work, and I got in the way somehow, but I guess I will never know. He later became a technical sergeant in the United States Air Force and worked as a computer programmer slash radar operator for NORAD inside Cheyenne Mountain Complex, like on Stargate. Growing up, my father had visitation rights to see me. I cannot say that he was a good influence. My earliest memory of him is tickling my feet until it was painful. I was screaming and crying until eventually giving up any hope to come. I would totally disassociate and try to play dead and pray for it to stop. He taught me that 666 was the number of the devil. I would, and I later went around school repeating it to the children. What a bad little bastard. Later, someone at school taught me how to draw a 5 pointed star, and I would doodle them often on all my papers, binders. One day, my father asked me, Do you know what to do with girls who wear skirts? Of course, I replied no. And he had no thoughts, and I had no thoughts about sex in the first grade. You lift them up and kiss their pee pee, he said. What a pervert to tell that to a first grader. So I took the advice of my father, literally thinking all these things he taught me must be normal to do. The next day at recess, I did what he had said, and of course, it was a big ordeal. But I had no idea what I was doing was wrong. I had several physical fights with other children and also knew many curse words already. I became a frequent visitor to the principal's office, even to the point that she became sort of a counselor and a friend. I remember that this school did not have doors on some of the restrooms, making it awkward to use them. We would we would go to change into the swimming pool. Multiple children would be put into one little restroom to change together. This resulted in us seeing each other naked, and I remember there was a joke among the boys to tuck in their wieners so that it looked like a girl and they'd laugh about it. I remember at lunch one day being all alone and encountered the largest dragonfly that I have ever seen in my life to this day, and remember having lots of neck issues at that time as well as nightmares. One of my most reoccurring nightmares involved being hunted by King Kong shaped ape who would always catch me hiding and, in the spot under the bike rack. Right before being swallowed, I would wake up screaming and sweating. The other nightmares that I had was of a spider the size of my bed crawling out from underneath it, consuming me while I slept. I never felt safe sleeping and always feared the night. I would say that it was not a normal fear of the dark, but an absolute terror of sleep at nighttime. I would often empty my toy box to hide inside of it or face my wall and turn around because I was petrified. I had a knowing that something was watching me and coming for me. Often I would wake up feeling very dizzy with mental images that I was falling into the floor and that it had opened up and without a bottom. I would see faces within my window at night and also I would hide in the restroom in the fetal position trying to avoid my bed, hoping it would stop. Once I remember being visited by Santa Claus, but after working with the hyperspace oversoul deprogramming techniques, I am convinced that this visit from Santa Claus was actually an alien encounter. We lived next to the small private county airport at the time reported UFO sightings, so I suppose this is possible, but I still get confused thinking about logistics of it all. Oddly enough, I used to doodle alien/human hybrids when I was growing up. These experiences would not be the end of my nighttime terrors for many years to come. When I first started sending Stewart emails, I had just finished high school and left home to live with my dad. I was trying to escape the stress and I was having from living with my stepdad and mother, the negative influence of friends that were getting me into trouble. Unfortunately, as it turns out, my dad was probably the worst person to try to confide in and get away from such things, but we did share a common dislike and a distrust for my stepfather. Every night I started having episodes of the 333 a.m. where I would wake up and be completely paralyzed. I knew something was in the room with me. I would feel some pressure pressing down on me deep into the bed above my chest. I could not speak. I could only mentally fight this force to overcome me. It would eventually stop after a struggle, but always came back the next night. One night during the struggle, I heard a female voice repeating, "I love you," into my right ear. This relaxed me so that I gave in and stopped fighting. Then it felt like something literally slipped into my body, through my mouth, and then the whole thing was over. I also recall a strong sulfur smell in the room during this time. Sometimes I would try to sleep in different locations, hoping to avoid this activity, but it did not work. One night when the paralysis came, I was in the basement and managed to struggle enough to start crawling with my upper body. This was as if my legs did not work and my voice could not be heard. When I awoke in terror, I was back in the basement where I started as if nothing happened. I could only explain it as being something demonic, although perhaps my dad had let demons into the house because of his drugs and alcohol use. Dad? My favorite movies were always science fiction like Star Wars and The Fifth Element. My cousin was my best friend for a long time. I remember that he liked the show Barney. He would encourage me to let his dog lick our face and mouths while watching the show together. I recall being aroused by the dog, ooh, before, but not mentally enjoying it. I thought it was disgusting. My feeling is now that it was some part of my programming that was allowed me to be aroused by non humans for ritual purposes. Mm. As it turns out, my first kiss was from my cousin when we were both under the age of 10. As we role played video games, characters from a game we used to play, we would also would do strange things like play the Ouija board and stealth simulate to achieve erections, which I thought nothing about at the time. Damn, dude. But now it seems very odd. Back then, I thought it was just a part of normal boyhood and body exploration. This trend remained with my closest friend in high school, who taught me to watch porn. He would insist that taking turns privately closing ourselves in a room, and then they were doing that. He also told me that he told me now he named his deed and encouraged me to do the same. Insisted that we both choose demonic names for it. Jesus Christ. Always had hormone I always had hormonal differences. This was very thin and had more facial hair than others during high school. A lot of girls became interested in me, but I never understood the signs or what to do. I was shy and afraid, so it was awkward to now have this success. I had never had any exclusive relationship with the opposite sex in my life last longer than a month. Once I had someone who wanted to commit to me, but I was young and afraid and pushed them away. Since high school, I had nothing but brief sexual encounters that left me feeling empty and alone. There was always drug or alcohol involved to initiate the relationship, and both the girl and myself would be promiscuous later on. Then, other times later in my life, I would stay sober and try to achieve better results. With no success, I would end up going 1 or 2 years without sex, and then find myself feeling alone. That I would revert back to my old habits and use alcohol and welcome activity with any stranger that I did not enjoy it. It's so long. I felt never. I feel I never really pursued or tried to initiate much relationships with people because it just feels like work to me and work to me, and I am afraid that they will ultimately leave me anyway. Many people just used me for sex and would find another partner, and I felt hurt for a long time after each case. Pornography must always be used for me to enjoy myself to orgasm, even though I don't enjoy it. I find myself ashamed after the act. It's the only way that I'm able to finish the job. Jesus, man. Eventually, I it just eventually it is just a bodily need at some point that needs to be released, such as blowing your nose. I waited until pent up tension is critical and affecting my mood or behavior before ever addressing it. Perhaps one of the contributing factors to this was as a child, I learned how to hold my urine as long as possible before ever going to relieve myself. My father would not permit me to use the restroom as a child and forced me to hold it. Eventually, I developed such a social anxiety that I would not go in any public restroom. With my sexual partners, it almost always experienced blue balls, a debilitating migraine during sexual activity. At times, I have completely shut down before engaging and had voices in my head saying that God does not want me to do this. The first time I performed cunnilingus rise, I got a bloody nose and immediately, which was strange and also pretty embarrassing. I once was with a girl who had a monarch butterfly on her journal that I happened to see before we had sex. And during the act, I got such a severe migraine headache, I had to stop. I also had sex with a partner who would slap me very hard and squeeze my testes to the point of pain. She would not allow me to kiss her lips, as I presumed it meant to her that the feelings were getting involved, and this was to be strictly business. She then told me she wanted later to develop a relationship with a female, which she did and perhaps in some other function of programming. I also noticed a trend as it happened to almost every sexual partner of mine. Shortly after they leave me, they become impregnated by someone else and stay with them for 1 or 2 years before separating that person as well. Now, I feel that this has something to do with my programming and them absorbing DNA from me and imprints the new child who can be programmed too. It is oddly similar to the movie Good Luck Chuck, where everyone he sleeps with and leaves, the next person they find is the person they marry. So Chuck becomes some kind of commodity with people lining up to use him so they can find happiness with the person after him. Oh, that's fucked up. He tries to be happy for them, but ultimately he feels alone and unhappy himself. Every girl I attract usually has a monarch butterfly or a dragonfly decoration in their environment somewhere. Sometimes they have esoteric tattoos or piercings and almost always smoke cigarettes. One night while observing the details around me, looking for possible triggers, I noticed something strange at a concert with a coworker. I noticed a small figurine on the stage of an owl, like the one seen at of Moloch at Bohemian Grove. When I saw this, somehow I had a knowing inside that we would end up having sex. It turns out that we did sleep together that night, even though I felt conflicted about it. However, It was a programming function, but at the time, after you sleep alone 500 days, it's hard for you to say no. How many more damn pages are there of this? Okay, I've got to pause. We're on page 34. That's as far as I can read for right now. Stay tuned for more, baby. I got stuff to do, though. Chapter 2.